Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in Sophomore English. We are in Unit 6 and we turn now on page 1063 and following to a very famous myth, one that I've referenced many times in our study. We're going to look at the ancient Greeks and Olivia E. Coleridge in her retelling of Prometheus and the First People. Before we get there though, I want to start on 1063 quickly for 2b. Write this one down. Myths, stories that are part of the oral tradition, right? Before being written down, usually told and retold from one generation to the next. Myths reflect the cultures of the people who originated and shared them. Some myths explain a natural phenomenon, specific custom, describing its origins, right? How it came to be. These myths reveal the beliefs of ancient cultures. Myths include characters with exceptional characteristics such as strength, bravery, wisdom. These traits emphasize qualities that the culture admired or feared. Some myths tell of a quest, write that down, that's huge, or a search for knowledge or a valued object. These myths reveal what was important to the culture. Other myths tell of a transgression or the violation of a rule. For example, these myths teach the values of the culture, right? Now, in all of these readings that we're about to enjoin, we want to be paying attention to cultural context, right? And analyzing cultural context and, of course, the questions that inevitably are generated by them. Hey, on page 1064, just to remind, you want to make sure you're paying attention to those vocabulary words because obviously we're going to see those in the assessment. Let's meet Olivia E. Coleridge for just a second before we get to the reading. On 1065, notice your dates, 1908 to 2006. Thousands of years ago in Greece, the Mycenaeans told stories of a great sea god. Their civilization collapsed around 1200 BC, but settlers from the north, the Dorians, blended the old myths with their own stories. Classical Greek mythology was born. The ancient Greeks represented the Olympic gods as having human qualities, what we call anthropomorphic, as we've said before. Just as the typical Greek household was dominated by the father, so Zeus dominated the Olympic gods. Retelling the tale, here now our heading, Greek myths were a favorite of Olivia E. Coleridge, who retells the myth of Prometheus. She was born in London, England. Coleridge studied Latin, Greek, and philosophy. By the way, did you know that many traditions of Western civilization, including democracy, science, philosophy, began with the ancient Greeks? The background for this myth, Prometheus, many of the characters in Prometheus and the First People are Olympians, the family of gods and goddesses ruled by Zeus and his wife Hera. Each god and goddess governs an aspect of human or of nature or human life. For example, Ares is the god of war. All right, let's turn now to page 1067. In this cutting, in this story, Prometheus and the First People provides an explanation for humans' mental capacity and the source of humanity's miseries. Prometheus gives humans the gift of mental powers. This is going to shock you. Prometheus doesn't just give us fire. He gives us a lot of other things. Then he gives humans their first valuable tool by stealing fire from the gods, and transgression for which he is punished, as we have pointed out before. All right, let's follow along now, 1067. At this point in our study as sophomores, you should be, and again, we're just a little over a year away from our ACTs, you should now be able to fully concentrate during a reading like this, to give full attention to a reading like this and conquer your monkey mind. Let's see how well we do. Here we go.
Prometheus and the First People by Olivia Coleridge. Humanity's Beginnings. The Greeks have several stories about how man came to be. One declares that he was created in the age of Cronus, or Saturn, who ruled before Zeus. At that time, the legend says, there was no sorrow, toil, sickness, or age. Men lived their lives in plenty and died as though they went to sleep. They tilled no ground, built no cities, killed no living thing, and among them war was unknown. The earth brought forth strawberries, cherries, and ears of wheat for them. Even on the bramble bushes grew berries good to eat. Milk and sweet nectar flowed in rivers for men to drink, and honey dripped from hollow trees. Men lived in caves and thickets, needing little shelter, for the season was always spring. Another legend declares that Zeus conceived of animals first, and he entrusted their creation to Prometheus. and Prometheus his brother. First, Prometheus undertook to order all things. But he was a heedless person and soon got into trouble. Finally, he was forced to appeal to Prometheus. "What have you done?" asked Prometheus. "Down on the earth," answered his brother, "there is a green, grassy clearing, ringed by tall oak trees and shaded by steep slopes from all but the midday sun. There I sat, and the animals came to me, while I gave to each the gifts which should be his from this time forward. Air I gave to the birds, seas to the fishes, land to four-footed creatures and the creeping insects, and to some, like the moles, I gave burrows beneath the earth." "That was well done," answered Prometheus. "What else did you do?" "Strength," said Prometheus, "I gave to lions and tigers and the fierce animals of the woods. Size I gave to others, like the great whales of the sea. The deer I made swift and timid, and the insects I made tiny, that they might escape from sight. I gave warm fur to the great bears and the little squirrels, keen eyes and sharp talons to the birds of prey, tusks to the elephant, hide to the wild boar, sweet songs and bright feathers to the birds. To each I gave some special excellence, that whether large or small, kind or terrible, each might live in his own place, find food, escape enemies, and enjoy the wide world which is his to inhabit." "All this is very good," said his brother Prometheus. "You have done well. Wherein lies your trouble?"
1068.
"Because I did not think it out beforehand," said the heedless brother sadly. "I did not count how many animals there were to be before I started giving. Now, when I have given all, there comes one last animal for whom I have neither skill nor shape, nor any place to dwell in. Everything has been given already." "What is this animal," said Prometheus, "who has been forgotten?" "His name," said Prometheus, "is man." Thus it was that the future of man was left to Prometheus, who was forced to make man different from all other creatures. Therefore he gave him the shape of the gods themselves, and the privilege of walking upright as they do. He gave him no special home, but made him ruler over the whole earth, and over the sea and air. Finally, he gave him no special strength or swiftness, but stole a spark from heaven, and lighted a heavenly fire within his mind, which should teach him to understand, to count, to speak, to remember. Man learned from it how to build cities, tame animals, raise crops, build boats, and do all the things that animals cannot. Prometheus also kindled fire on earth, that man might smelt metals and make tools. In fact, from this heavenly fire of Prometheus, all man's greatness comes. Before this time, fire was a divine thing, and belonged only to the gods. It was one of their greatest treasures, and Zeus would never have given Prometheus permission to use it in the creation of man. Therefore, when Prometheus stole it, Zeus was furious indeed. He chained Prometheus to a great, lofty rock, where the sun scorched him by day and the cruel frost tortured him by night. Not content with that, he sent an eagle to tear him, so that, though he could not die, he lived in agony. For many centuries Prometheus hung in torment. But he was wiser than Zeus, and by reason of a secret he had, he forced Zeus in later ages to set him free. By then also, Zeus had learned that there is more in ruling than power and cruelty. Thus the two at last were friends.
Okay, let's pause for a moment. Just jot it down at level 1. We have in mythology what are called cosmogenic myths. Write that down, cosmogonic. Origination myths, origin myths. And notice we've got a couple of them that we're going to play with here. The first one, at the very beginning of our cutting, of our reading, on page 1067, is the idea that once, some of the stories say, humans lived in perfect Eden spring-like, everything amazing all the time. The second story has to do with Prometheus and his brother, Epimetheus. And Epimetheus' job is to give traits to all of the animals. And so he gives all these different traits to all the animals. But then, when it comes time for the last animal, humans, he's run out of traits to give. It's then Prometheus who will bestow on humans, in a word, technology. Put that in your notes. Prometheus is understood as the originator of technologies. All kinds of technologies. Most significantly, the human mind and the capacity to problem solve. We have used this word picture before. Two different mammals come to a watering hole with a whole bunch of corpses lying around, dead animals of all kinds. Clearly the water is tainted in the watering hole. A dog will walk up and will be, or any other number of mammals will walk up and will be starving of thirst and will drink from the water even though the water is going to kill him. A human will walk up, and even though the human is dying of thirst, the human will infer, this is bad water and I will die if I drink from this water. I cannot drink from this water even though I'm really, really thirsty. That was given, according to this myth, by Prometheus. But most significant in terms of technology, fire. Prometheus elects to give humans fire. Of course, here's the thing about fire. It has both its blessing as well as its curse, yes? So, for example, fire allows us to do all kinds of important things that are positive, but also we wage war in horrific ways, and violence is often resolved in conflict, is often resolved through violence and fire. And so there's both good and bad. Finally, in this story, we're reminded, we've used it many times before, what it means to be Promethean. Write that down. Promethean. It's a certain type of person that is in conflict with authority. We can think of Antigone from an earlier study as being Promethean. Prometheus and Zeus do not get on. Zeus is really mad that Prometheus shared fire with humans, and for it, Prometheus is crucified on a rock. An eagle will come and eat out. Sometimes it's usually his liver or his heart. And well, Prometheus can't die. He's in horrific pain, and yet he will not apologize for what he's done. Of course, the story ends ultimately with Zeus and Prometheus becoming pals. They forgive each other because Zeus begins to realize over time he has made a mistake. Now, the next part of our reading is evil. Why do bad things happen in the world? We'll come back to this in our senior study, but let's put the word here now. Theodicy in your notes. Theodicy. Theodicy. Theo, the Greek etymological root of God. Dike, justice. Okay, the Greek word for justice. In other words, the question of theodicy is this question. Why does bad stuff happen? Why does bad stuff happen? What is the source of evil and pain and suffering in this world? Let's listen to a story that outlines now a possible answer to that question. All right?
The coming of evil.
1069.
After the punishment of Prometheus, Zeus planned to take his revenge on man. He could not recall the gift of fire, since it had been given by one of the immortals. But he was not content that man should possess this treasure in peace and become perhaps as great as were the gods themselves. He therefore took counsel with the other gods, and together they made for man a woman. All the gods gave gifts to this new creation. Aphrodite gave her fresh beauty like the spring itself. The goddess Athena dressed her and put on her a garland of flowers and green leaves. She had also a golden diadem beautifully decorated with figures of animals. In her heart Hermes put cunning, deceit, and curiosity. She was named Pandora, which means all gifted, since each of the gods had given her something. The last gift was a chest in which there was supposed to be great treasure, but which Pandora was instructed never to open. Then Hermes, the messenger, took the girl and brought her to Prometheus. Prometheus had been warned by his brother to receive no gifts from Zeus, but he was a heedless person, as ever, and Pandora was very lovely. He accepted her, therefore, and for a while they lived together in happiness, for Pandora, besides her beauty, had been given both wit and charm. Eventually, however, her curiosity got the better of her, and she determined to see for herself what treasure it was that the gods had given her. One day, when she was alone, she went over to the corner where her chest lay and cautiously lifted the lid for a peep. The lid flew up out of her hands and knocked her aside, while before her frightened eyes dreadful shadowy shapes flew out of the box in an endless stream. There were hunger, disease, war, greed, anger, jealousy, toil, and all the griefs and hardships to which man from that day has been subject. Each was terrible in appearance, and as it passed, Pandora saw something of the misery that her thoughtless action had brought on her descendants. At last the stream slackened, and Pandora, who had been paralyzed with fear and horror, found strength to shut her box. The only thing left in it now, however, was the one good gift the gods had put in among so many evil ones. This was hope. And since that time, the hope that is in man's heart is the only thing which has made him able to bear the sorrows that Pandora brought upon him.
All right, one of the roles of mythology is to answer the question of why is there evil? Ironically, the answer is, well, after Prometheus gives fire to humans and Zeus is mad about it, he decides to get revenge on humans by creating a woman. So let's go ahead and put this in our notes. This is one of those ancient storylines where men make up stories to explain why bad things happen by blaming women. And in this case, this story, and of course we can already jot down at 3a, we are familiar with the story about Adam and Eve in the garden, and it's Eve who is the one who eats of the forbidden fruit. We have a very similar kind of story going on here, where, of course, Zeus is going to create this amazing gift, Pandora. The gods will give her all of the amazing enchantments and gifts. And there she goes down to Prometheus's brother, and Epiphanes is very interested in her. Prometheus warned him, don't accept any gifts from Zeus because Zeus is out to jack us. And sure enough, they fall in love. They're together. But Pandora, did you notice it? Curiosity. You had that saying, curiosity killed the cat. Well, curiosity created the evil, according to this myth. So she goes over to the box, the chest, where all the terrible evils are. Notice they're all listed for us, right? Shadowy shapes and all of the terrible evils that are going to come out. Hunger, disease, war, greed, anger, jealousy, the fact that we all have to work so hard, etc., etc. All the griefs, all the suffering, they all come out. She slams it shut, the door of the chest shut, in time to save hope. And therefore, this is why humans continue to have at least hope, living in a world of tremendous pain and sorrow. Obviously, this is one of those kinds of stories that we look at and we go, seriously? Why is it that women get blamed for this kind of thing? Well, the answer usually to that is that men are the ones who invent these stories. And a story like this, as we have said before, instantiates the patriarchy and keeps, of course, men capable of saying there's a reason why women have to stay subjugated to men. Because women are the ones responsible for all of the terrible pain and suffering in the world, etc., etc. By the way, do note that in this story, evil and pain, suffering, is not created by the woman. It's actually put in the box by the gods, right? But, of course, it's Pandora that let them all out. Of course, at 3b, you can ask and answer this question. Is this fair in your estimation to blame women for all of the flaws in the world, for all of the evil and suffering and pain in the world. All right, we turn now to the next section, the Great Flood on 1070 and following. Let's listen to this story now, another myth.
The Great Flood. When evil first came among mankind, people became very wicked. War, robbery, treachery, and murder prevailed throughout the world. Even the worship of the gods, the laws of truth and honor, reverence for parents and brotherly love were neglected. Finally, Zeus, determined to destroy the race of men altogether, and the other gods agreed. All the winds were therefore shut up in a cave, except the south wind, the wet one. He raced over the earth with water streaming from his beard and long white hair. Clouds gathered around his head, and dew dripped from his wings and the ends of his garments. With him went Iris, the rainbow goddess,
1071.
while below Poseidon smote the earth with his trident until it shook and gaped open, so that the waters of the sea rushed up over the land. Fields and farmhouses were buried. Fish swam in the tops of the trees. Sea beasts were quietly feeding where flocks and herds had grazed before. On the surface of the water, boars, stags, lions, and tigers struggled desperately to keep afloat. Wolves swam in the midst of flocks of sheep, but the sheep were not frightened by them, and the wolves never thought of their natural prey. Each fought for his own life and forgot the others. Over them wheeled countless birds, winging far and wide in the hope of finding something to rest upon.